Yeah, I mean, I think that it took a long time. I think there is an innate way that you draw. One thing there's two things that come to mind.
sure.
One is you hear a lot about I feel like I've heard a lot of stand-up comics talk about how the first time they got on stage, the first couple times, they were doing things a certain way, and then they tried that style and that style and that style and all these different kind of ways of being a stand-up. And then eventually, when they really felt like they found their thing, it resembled a lot what they did the first time they got on stage. Now, I think that to me, there's a great story expert named Brian McDonald who he has a book called Invisible Ink, and he talks about Wizard of Oz. And I think I've actually heard this theory or this theme from a few different sources. I don't think it was maybe his invention or his noticing of this, but he said that the Wizard of Oz is about you have everything you need because, she had the ruby red slippers the whole time. And so I do think that's true, but I would add another layer to it because if you had everything you need, just as you are right now, just that first time you got on stage, then at the end of that movie, you would feel a little bit ripped off because you'd be like, okay, she had it the whole time. All of this was for nothing. It was all meaningless, but you don't feel that way, right? You don't, at the end of Wizard of Oz, you don't feel like, oh my gosh, this person is an idiot. Why? No, you're like, yeah. And so for me, I think the way I would think about, I love what Brian McDonald says about that, but I would think about it slightly differently where it's like the journey isn't to find something you don't have. It's to discover what you already have. And so I think that even though when you're a kid or when you start out, you have some of the raw material of your style, I think it's in the drawing and the reps and the taste and the trying different things that it really kind of gets sharper. And I think that process probably never ends. But I do think there were some really intentional exercises of trying to find the patterns between my favorite artists, people like Tove Jansson, who created Moomin, Jim Henson, the creator of the Muppets, and people like Hayao Miyazaki. And even like Dr. Seuss, and I put all of those things on the same mood boards and tried to create collages and stuff with them even, and kind of notice what are the similarities. And it turns out there was tons of similarities, not just on the surface, but then symbolically, the kind of stories they're telling, that the themes and the images. And I used that as a jumping off point to create that first project I was telling you about, the daily character drawing. And then there were other layers too. But that, I feel like a lot of the stuff from that project ended up becoming quintessential to what I do now. But I also feel like I'm always still learning.
For sure. Yeah, that's interesting because especially about the stand-up comics and the first time they get up on stage representing. Because I know, especially for me, when it comes to my illustrative style, there's for a long time where I just was like, what I do is not good enough, or it's ugly, or but look at these people over here who are doing art or art in a way where it's like, they're almost like a photocopy. Like they're able to draw things so perfectly and so clean. And for a long time, I pushed down how I was supposed to make art and just wanted to copy other people. And I know people struggle with that a lot, and probably more with social media. When I was young, we didn't have that.
It's also just part of the process.
Yeah, for sure.
That's just part of the process. This is something that drives me absolutely nuts. Go read any biography.
For sure.
Go listen to all of your favorite creators. I don't know any of my favorite creators that didn't start out just copying their favorite things. I don't mean just fully ripping off. I'm not saying bootlegging their stuff. I'm not saying that, but I am saying that most that you study will say, I was kind of a cheap copy of this thing that I loved.
For sure.
That's a part of the process. I really think, it's sad to me actually that we don't have the kind of I mean, I don't think creative people have ever been well supported,
100%.
but I think that there were pockets of time with pockets of, the economic structure where you could have apprenticeships and patrons, and a huge percentage of what you'd be doing there and be supported doing would be copying the masters. And so I think we often attack and blame artists for being derivative. But what about the systems that don't allow for you to be bad for a little bit?
For sure.
You don't even going to college and spending a few years being bad and being derivative and whatever. It's not free. Mm-hmm. It's expensive. And so I don't know. When I see someone coming up and I see them borrowing too much, even from me, of course I have. And there are times where I've had a direct message that I'm just like, hey, this felt a little bit too much or whatever, Sure. I'm not saying that there's a lot of nuance here, but I try to have a lot of grace for that, because it's they were just pushed out the nest and said, okay, what skill do you have? Oh, you make pictures? Boom, make a living. And it's okay, but it takes a long time
for sure.
of doing nothing that's good or worth anything.
Yep.
And we all stand on the shoulders of giants.
Yes.
We're all going to learn from other people. Nobody came out and just no one's ever seen this. That doesn't exist.
Yep. That's it. Yeah. And that's what's hard is it feels like there's this thing where it's well, I got to make money right now. And it's but you do have to be bad. And then I've also heard the concept of, have you had the concept of a taste gap, where it's you might have really good taste and you really love this thing, but you're not going to be able to put it out like that immediately. There's a gap between what you're going to be capable of before, and there's work in there before you have to get there. So I don't know. I just feel like there's more creative ways to kind of handle these situations of getting people from here to over here. And it's not just pay me $1 million and I'll give you a certificate. So,
for real.
But I'm just now getting back to being I'll illustrate now and be it reminds me of when I was a kid. The style really reminds me of when I was a kid, but it feels right. It finally feels like I'm doing something that's what I want and what I want it to be. So there's a little bit in there where it's you kind of have to let yourself be yourself, and it's going to be bad. Yeah. And you will pick up things that are this improves it. But I don't know. We just got to give ourselves probably grace and space. That's
yeah. And that's there's two other pieces that I think about. One is there are things that I made before that project that I look back and I'm I could have made this today.
For sure.
But they were few and far between where I would land in those. But there's a handful of images that I made in college or out of college, right out of college, where I'm that's exactly what I'm doing right now. Almost exactly. Yeah. But the other piece to it is it kind of reminds me of I love the concept of taste. Mm-hmm. I've done a lot of episodes about taste over the years, and I've put a lot of time and energy thinking about that, so I'm glad you brought that up. And one piece of it is the idea, one of the things you see on all the cooking shows is I like when Gordon Ramsay will be that's you on a plate. That's what you're looking for. And usually what that means is it is a combination of your background and your taste. And you've kind of taken where you've come from and you've elevated it with an acquired taste, something that you've learned over time. And so I think that journey of the first time the stand-up gets on stage versus later, there's a lot of integration of acquired tastes, nuance, and getting skill acquisition and really being able to do it. Because that first time you did it, even if you're in the style, even if you're being yourself, you probably aren't getting a ton of laughs.
Oh, yeah.
You still had to learn a lot to become, actually good at what you do.
For sure. Yeah. So that is, that's really, it's really, it should be freeing to know that there's this journey that you can take, and you just have to take it at your own pace. And I don't know. I feel like a lot of people blame social media for we do compare ourselves to that's someone's highlight reel. That's the best thing they're ever doing. But it does also give us room to explore taste. and to get
Yeah.
under an understanding of what's actually out there. So that's, again, with the double-edged swords, there's such a duality to kind of everything that we do. So
Yeah, there is. There totally is. But I think it's good. I do think it's good to be, especially when you're young in the journey. I think it's good to I do think it's be excited, be a part of it, consume it, be all about it, make the Pinterest boards and the saved boards and all that stuff, and just go buck wild and be obsessed, because you won't be like that forever. True. Eventually that'll evolve into something different. Like I still do really like illustration, and I really do. And I save a lot of stuff, and I still am passionate about it, but it's not where my joy comes from in the work.
Yeah.
I think, so I think it's good. Like, get all about it.
For sure.